Hi everyone, I'm Miss Davis and today we're going to cover plant transport and nutrition. You will recall from the last lecture that we talked about the different types of plant tissue. Today we're going to focus on the role of vascular tissue in its movement of water, minerals, and sugars. So let's quickly review the cells that make xylem and phloem, which are the parts of that tissue. The xylem is composed of vessel elements and tracheids, which form a pipeline through the plant, from the roots to the leaves. Now, these cells are non-living when they are functional, so it creates that pipeline that's empty to be able to move the water. On the other hand, phloem is composed of two types of living cells called sieve tube members and companion cells. Now, you should recall that the sieve tube members do not contain a nucleus, but the companion cells do, and they support the sieve tube members. They manage them, they help them do their job. So now let's look at how water moves up the plant from the roots to the shoots. Moving water throughout a plant can be a daunting task, especially if the plant is as tall as a giant redwood, which can be 300 feet tall. The water moving up the plant has to overcome the force of gravity that wants to pull it back down. So let's look at how plants do this by investigating the cohesion tension model. Now, water enters through the roots by the process of osmosis. Now, osmosis is the movement of water from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. Now, water is going to take a certain path as it enters into the xylem. It's going to enter through the root hairs, then it's going to travel through the cortex, which is the ground tissue, through the endodermis, which has the Casparian strip, and then finally into the xylem. Now, the roots need to make sure that the water that they take in does not exit the root. So, there's this waxy layer called the Casparian strip that's going to prevent water from leaving the root. Because it's wax, that's a fat. It doesn't like water, so it's going to make sure it doesn't go backwards, okay? It doesn't flow backwards. Now, the Casparian strip in this diagram is shown in orange. So you can see where it's located, and it's going to prevent the backflow of water. This movement of water, called osmosis, is passive, meaning that the cells in the roots do not have to use energy to do this. So it's passive, and they're not using any energy to move the water in. Now, once the water moves into the xylem, the water molecules begin sticking to each other. This is called cohesion. So this is the cohesion part of the cohesion tension model. They also start sticking to the sides of the xylem, which is adhesion. Now, this creates a water column. Once the water column is created, as more water enters, it starts to push the water up the plant. Now, this can only go so far because gravity starts to push back down. Water has to then be pulled up from the leaves. This process is called transpiration. Transpiration is the process that pulls the water up, and it's the evaporation of water from the stomata of the leaf. Now, remember, the stomata were those tiny holes in the leaf, okay, where the water gets evaporated. Now, since water sticks to each other, as one water molecule evaporates and leaves, it then pulls the whole water column up the plant. Now, this is what creates the tension in the cohesion tension model. So we talked about the cohesion, water sticking to each other. The tension is caused by transpiration. Now, minerals are going to take this same path up the plant. However, they have to be actively taken in. The plant has to use energy to get those minerals in to their tissues. Okay, so water is passive, but minerals have to be taken in actively. Now, photosynthesis takes place in the leaves of the plants, and the products are sugars, and they need to then be transported to the other parts of the plant that don't do photosynthesis, especially like the roots and the flowers. The cells in the leaves are called the source, and they will actively push the sugars into the phloem. Okay, so they're going to use energy to push them into the phloem. Once there's a high concentration of sugar in the phloem, water is going to passively follow through osmosis. Okay, and you can see that here in the picture at number 1. Water is going to passively move in. This is going to create a pressure that then is going to push the sugar solution or flow the sugar solution from the source to the sink. The sink is any other part of the plant that requires the sugar. It could be the flowers, it could be the stem, and it'll especially be the roots since they can't do photosynthesis since they're underground. So this is what we would call the pressure flow model. Okay, Pressure is created, which causes the sugar to flow to other parts of the plant. Now remember, the source is the leaves. That's where the sugar is made. The sink is where they're going to end up going based on the requirements of sugar in other parts of the plant. Now, plants also need nutrients in the form of minerals to survive. Now, these tables are in your book. Okay, table 22.5 is in your book. Some minerals are considered macronutrients because the plant needs them in relatively large amounts. These would be things like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and so on, which you can see in the chart on the left. Others are micronutrients that the plant still requires or needs, but they need it in trace or small amounts. These would be like iron, boron, copper, zinc, and so on, which is seen in the chart on the right. Minerals can also be considered essential if the plant requires them to survive. Okay, so these would all be considered essential. There are others that are beneficial. Some of these that are beneficial will help the plant grow better, but the plant can still survive without them. So we've talked about water, sugars, and minerals. So plants need to transport these substances, water and minerals, up from the soil to the leaves. And then, of course, sugars made in photosynthesis in the leaves down to other parts of the plants, whether it's the flowers, the stems, or the roots. Now you have one more lecture over plants before your next unit exam. Again, I hope that these lectures are helping you prepare for this exam, but please let me know if you have any questions or concerns as you're going through these plant chapters.